I just shared my screen. Did that work? Can you see the presentation? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, then I'll start from here. Let me just reduce so that I can see my computer better. Okay. So, okay. So welcome to this presentation. I'm really happy to be here and present to you this topic that's really close to my heart on meaningful human-computer interaction, reflecting on Viktor Frankl's work in a digitalized world. I'm Nguyen, and I'm from the Center for Technology Experience of the AIT, the Austrian Institute of Technology. So I'm presenting today from Vienna. It's almost sundown, so it'll get a bit dark on my side of the globe right now. Okay, so according to Viktor Frankl, the quest for meaning is this fundamental motivating force of human beings. And as we also heard in the keynote speech, life has meaning under all, even the most adverse circumstances. And I think this message is particularly relevant in current times when people are struggling with current events, but also with general changes in society and politics and economy. Digitalization is one other contributing factor that contributes to upheavals in a lot of aspects of the lives of individuals and also of society. It affects how we communicate and interact with each other, how we learn and share information, how we work, how we play. And so these aspects also affect how we express and understand our values, and with them, how we as individuals and as a collective, as groups of people, search for and fulfill meaning. So for a positive humanistic development of digitalization, the question that arose for me and the group of great researchers that I worked with is how these current changes can be kind of mapped. How can we develop digitalization and human-computer interaction in a positive humanistic fashion? And how can digitalization, for example, through technology interactions, through novel understandings of work and of education, etc., help people on their journey of finding meaning in life? And what we thought was that there may be some need for kind of theory redevelopments on Frankl. That the work that Frankl did quite a while ago already needs to be viewed through a lens of reconstruction and reflection against the changes in society that we are experiencing right now. So this presentation will illuminate work on two research projects. We have, on the one hand, a project we call Digital Frankl, and the other is called Resolve. And these both showcase different aspects of this intersection between work of Viktor Frankl and of more like technology, digitalization, human-computer interaction. And we did that both through critical theoretical examinations of human-computer interaction as a field and of Frankl's work, and by exploring the potential of an emerging technology, in this case, virtual reality, and how that could support meaning finding and could strengthen resilience. Before I start with this first case study, I want to give you like a quick introduction to human-computer interaction, which is abbreviated to HCI, so I'll probably switch between those two terms from now on. So human-computer interaction is a research field that is quite young. I think most in the literature would say that it began in the 1970s. Some say it's a bit earlier with the start of the first computer or the first personal computer. But HCI in general has been really central in investigating how technology should be designed, how they should be implemented, and how they should be embedded into systems to best support humans Along the times, obviously technologies have changed a lot from the 1970s to now. They are capable of a lot more, and the goal of using technologies has also changed. And with that, the research paradigms and questions in HCI have also adapted. This is often described in 3 waves, which you can see on the slide right here. With the first wave, the top of the pyramid, basically, which is about single users who interact with an interactive system, but it's more like a desktop single user setting. In the second wave of HCI, starting in the 1990s, roughly, it was about collaboration, more like groupware systems. And we are now in the third. Some say there's already a fourth wave, but let's say we are in the third wave, and that's when systems between humans and technologies have become a lot more pervasive. So technologies everywhere now, from your mobile phone to your smart home to what's in, the car that you're using, and so on and so forth. And so these systems between technologies and humans need to interact with multiple interactive devices and deal with a lot of changing environments along with the users and the tasks, which opens a lot of new research questions. And with this more recent work in HCI, we also have a lot more questions about like politics and values, how what we believe and what we value affect the technologies that we use, and the other way around, how technologies affect what we believe in, what we do, how we are politically engaged, etc. What's also quite new is that in recent years, I'd say like in the last 10 years, is what we found in the literature, is that this topic of meaning and enabling meaningful design has become a bit more relevant as a topic in human-computer interaction. And in line with that, there's also there are some calls for discussions on the impact of technologies on the sense of meaningfulness of users. So having like an interaction with your smartphone that provides you with some kind of meaning. And I think that will continue to become an even more important topic as this interwovenness between technologies and humans continues to evolve. So that's a quick intro to human-computer interaction if you haven't had contact with that term yet. Now I want to move on to the first case study from the Digital Frankl project. And in this project, we kind of aim to see how the theories from Viktor Frankl's work kind of work in relation to modern society and the increasing interwovenness of humans and technologies. And what we conceptualize then is this question: what is meaningful HCI? What does meaningful HCI actually mean? And we did that by looking at freedom, responsibility, and norms. So, as Frankl said, humans are beings that struggle for the concrete meaning in their individual lives. At the same time, the concern for meaning in and of their existence is one of the main characteristics of humans. So, obviously, then users are humans, and they thus always seek for meaning in the terms of Frankl. And this understanding of humans as meaning seeking, at the point where we started this Digital Frankl project, was, I think, quite rarely considered in HCI, as I just said before. But even more importantly, the community hasn't really come to a conclusion of what meaningfulness actually means. So there's really just few exceptions, like the word of Capdellini or Meckler and Hornbeck, which really researches on the field of meaningful interaction intersects with technology. So that was the starting point of our case study here. And so to address this, we explored HCI through the lens of Frankl's work in existential philosophy. And we took up these 3 concepts that I said before: responsibility, freedom, and nous, which he has described as the existentials of being human. And we use these three concepts to explore how they interact with technology, how they are affected by technology, and how they can affect technology and users, and so humans. Against this background, we took up these concepts and tried to investigate the role in HCI. And we did that in a theoretical way, kind of. And what we aimed to provoke was this kind of discussion to create a foundation to incorporate meaning in human-computer interaction on several levels. So first, we wanted to present theoretical concepts to provide an in-depth understanding of meaning, which was only sparsely done in HCI before. Second, we wanted to see how and whether the existentials could enable critical design reflections and evaluation. Third, we thought that these existentials and Frankl's work could contribute to epistemology in HCI by understanding users as meaning-seeking subjects. And lastly, we found this concept of responsibility really important, as it draws the role draws attention to the role of the designer that we as technology designers and developers have in this process. So, as I said, we presented a theoretical examination in this case study, and we also conducted 2 expert workshops, including experts on Frankl's theories, logotherapists. We also had social scientists, and there was a lot of involvement of interdisciplinary technology researchers as well. And we used both our theoretical examination as well as the findings from the research as kind of input to revise and extend our initial concepts. Now, what we found was kind of that there were 4 dimensions to each of the existentials, so to freedom, to responsibility, and to nous. And these were the dimensions as an outcome, as their embeddedness in technology, in an interaction, and of usage/non-usage. So I'll describe these 4 dimensions for each of these existentials in the next few slides. Let's begin with freedom. So freedom as an outcome of technology usage refers to opening up new possibilities, life choices, and experiences for the user. As a very simple example, the internet opened up a lot of possibilities for, I think, all of us. This is an online conference. So this technology enabled us to connect with people across the world as an outcome. So it provided us with more freedom in that sense. When we look at freedom as embedded in technology, we see that the technology and design becomes an artifact of the designer's ideas. So in other words, the designer's notions of meaningful tasks and of what freedom is are reflected in the design. So this includes, for example, the designer's ideas of how and when and where and for what purpose users should use a technology. Freedom in interaction typically relates to aspects of user control in HCI, so it's a bit more like lower level. Frankl's ideas go beyond that. The freedom of choices includes all interaction decisions, as well as shaping environments and virtual worlds. One example that we thought of was that there's this concept of open worlds in video games, for example. So users, gamers in open world concept video games are free to choose how they engage with the world, where to do missions or whether they just explore the world. But also in like smartphone apps, the workflows give us a specific degree of freedom in the interaction. For example, PowerPoint doesn't force me to work on my presentation in a specific order. I'm free to choose how I want to proceed with the task and what I do next. The last dimension is that of usage/non-usage. So yeah, users have the freedom to use technologies in unplanned or also unintended ways, or they can choose to not use technology at all. So this kind of non-usage is a continuum. Notably, non-freedom of non-usage doesn't really originate from the technology itself, but it emerges from the entanglement of technology with society and culture. Next, we move on to responsibility. First, again, as an outcome, Frankl points out that all individuals have the responsibility to seek a meaningful life. In interaction with technology, people can take on such responsibility for meaningful existence. For example, technology can aim to support sustainable behavior or help take on social responsibility. So being able to take on responsibility can be an outcome of interacting with the technology. Responsibility as an outcome also strongly relates to the individual's realization of values. So because of that, responsibility is bound to human beings, not to artifacts. So there's always a responsibility embedded in technology, and that's the responsibility of the designers, which is also closely interwoven with the design process. So we as researchers and as designers need to be aware of this responsibility. For example, by asking questions like, do we as designers consider social power structures? Do we consider marginalized user groups? Do we explicitly aim to reduce social inequalities? Do we hold ourselves accountable even if a system does not meet that goal? I think that's quite timely when we think about the potentials and dangers of artificial intelligence, of large language models that have been coming into our lives in the last half year, few months. Now, responsibility in interaction is something that we call a second order responsibility because it's a means to fulfill other responsibilities through the usage of technology. So the responsibility of usage or non-usage can, for example, be seen in what responsibility do we have to have a good ecological footprint, for example. Sometimes it might be good not to use technology because that aligns better with our values. Or sometimes it is the responsible thing to use a technology, to use the defibrillator if you see someone having a heart attack, or to call your parents if you haven't for a long time. So again, there's responsibility in the spectrum of usage and non-usage. Let's come to the last of the existentials, NOS. And with the help of technologies, NOS can be achieved as an outcome. I think NOS was maybe the most difficult concept to conceptualize for us in relation to tangible things and to technology interactions. But we found some things like that technologies can support our search for meaning by bringing people closer together despite physical distance, as we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, or as we're experiencing now at this virtual conference. Technology can also enable us to be noetic by being creative or funny. As such, technology, because it became an inherent part of our societal life, has an impact on our strive for meaning and connectivity to other members in our society. So in this sense, technologies actually co-shape society, and this noetic dimension goes beyond the situative use of technologies. It doesn't say that there's only nos in the moment, but that technologies shape our whole social life, work, and our relationships. The nos embedded in technology is a manifestation of the nos of the users envisioned by the designer, or more generally, the notions and images of the user. So what that means is that we as designers have a picture of the user in our head, and that can be a picture of a noetic person or not so much. And so again, this is something that we ask ourselves now. Does the technology actually reflect the user's strive for meaning and for self-fulfillment, for responsibility, and for being able to take responsibility for your actions? Does it allow for meaningful and creative practices? Or is the user reduced to kind of a machine for providing input to the technology's output? North in interaction, as I mentioned before, includes these kinds of creative and playful interactions, but also the possibilities of inscribing the self within the technology. For example, a very low key example, you inscribe something of yourself by choosing a personal desktop image or by personalizing your phone's background. And these options might enable users to make their self explicit in the technology. Also, users enter a kind of relationship with the technology they use. And so these interactions, they could be shaped by dimensions like trust or fun or meaning. Lastly, we really debated a lot on whether a noetic dimension to usage and non-usage exists. And we came to the conclusion that it is a bit debatable and maybe depends on the role that the specific technologies play in our lives, which is not the same for either any of us. But the nose of non-usage comes to bear when usage has a direct or indirect influence on our notions of humanity. So one example that we have there is that when the technology for ultrasound was created, that actually changed the notion of unborn life and the experience of pregnancy. And in that sense, the technology had an impact on what we understand what being human means. And it provided us with a new avenue of conceptualizing it. And that's a way that Norse represents itself in usage of technology. So those were the kind of theoretical conceptualizations we had, these kind of 4 dimensions that we were able to find in each of the existentials and how they actually affect and are affected by technology use. As I think I already hinted a bit at while I presented the dimensions, is that these dimensions are obviously very highly interwoven. So I want to give you an example of the existentials, and we'll look at this interaction dimension to show this in detail. So to enable noise in interaction, we need users to have a freedom in interaction, as users need choices and options to actually be creative in their interaction and to have a noetic experience. So in that way, noise and freedom are connected. Further, noise and interaction also requires responsibility in interaction. We need to ensure understandable and controllable and reliable interactions to enable a positive relation with the technology. So it seems overall that freedom and responsibility in interaction enable noise. However, sometimes freedom also has to be carefully balanced against responsibility and noise, because more choices also increase the complexity of the interaction and can lower the ease of use. So noise and responsibility in interaction open up questions of how much freedom is needed to allow the user's responsibility and noise to come true. So there's all this if-then dependencies between these existentials, and we found these basically for all of them. So this was the first use case, a really theoretical project work that showcased how we applied Frankl's work to an area of research that hasn't so far had that much contact with his work. With our examinations, we really aim to provide the human-computer interaction community with a framework of what meaningful HCI is. And through this, we see a lot of potential to enable design for meaningful lives. So what we found is that the freedom, responsibility, and norms as outcomes and as interactions enable design for meaningful lives. We also found that Frankl's understanding of humans can improve HI's epistemology, especially the existentials embedded in technology, and norms could guide future work in HI there. Last, the existentials put a spotlight really on the values and the notions of users that are inscribed in the technology, and they put a spotlight and unveil hidden power structures in technology design, which I think is probably was for us the most important lesson that we got out of the project as technology designers. Okay, so let's move on to the second case study, supporting resilience through virtual reality, where we designed and evaluated a VR experience based on logotherapy. The motivation behind this work was that many of us human-computer interaction researchers want to support people's well-being and want to support their resilience. This is also reflected in an increase in HI research on well-being and on mental health. And for us, the question was then, how can we best do this? And since we had this previous work with Frankl, we saw that there were some bridges that could be built. And so we wanted to investigate whether VR technology might be something that can support this. Before we start going into the details, again, a quick detour into virtual reality for those of you who haven't experienced it yourself. So virtual reality is a technology that uses computer-generated environments to create three-dimensional simulations. That's the very dry definition. You can see here that usually you wear goggles, so you don't see anything in real life anymore. And then you see a computer graphic that is 360. So however you turn, you see what is on the lenses there. And the literature really indicates that virtual reality, VR, as I will call it from now on, can have a lot of positive influence. For example, it can affect interpersonal emotions such as empathy, so it can increase empathy. It can change attitudes towards stigmatized groups, and it can reduce dehumanization of other social groups. So what we hypothesized was that logotherapy could benefit from a transfer to virtual reality. We saw that, for example, through this idea of perspective taking. Perspective taking allows users to experience the perspective of another person or of another group through this kind of computer-generated environment. And you can take on either the first-person perspective of whoever you want to empathize with, or you can have a third-party observer position. And that's something that's really easy to do in VR without having to rely on merely the imagination of people. We also thought that this idea of virtual embodiment could be something really beneficial for this transfer of logotherapy into the virtual realm. So virtual embodiment creates a sense of body ownership over a virtual avatar. So in a way, you can become whoever you want to become, or whoever you should become in order to learn something. And so you can take on different ethnicities, gender, ages, species, even size, anything. And the literature shows that if the VR experience is made in a good way, then you actually begin to really consider yourself closer to whoever you are embodying. And this kind of virtual embodiment has been shown to reduce implicit bias. Lastly, there's a lot of interesting stuff about reflection in VR, which is also something that is a good thing to translate to like this virtual use of logotherapeutical ideas. So overall, what we wanted to know in our project is to what extent a VR experience inspired by logotherapy can positively affect resilience, and how reflection can be integrated into the VR experience to support resilience. I think I'll skip this video, but if anyone wants to see it, let me know and I can share it with you. So I want to show you now the elements of the VR experience. The overall goal of the VR experience was to develop a kind of experience to help users think about how to find meaning in life by immersing themselves into universal negative emotions from the tragic triad. And we chose guilt and suffering for that. So in principle, in this VR experience, users took on a role, a specific role, and then go through a scenario. The person whose role they take in go through this kind of negative experience. In the first VR scene, that's related to guilt, and the second related to suffering. And after each experience, they move to what we call a room of possibilities, a kind of explicit reflection space. So here are some screenshots from this first VR experience. In this experience, we utilized elements like gamification and interactivity to create something that is not possible in a one-on-one experience, to see if it's something that can translate our message. So the users take on the role of a person, we call them Alex, who has accidentally caused a traffic accident, and Alex feels really strong guilt because of it. And you, the user in the role of Alex, now have the chance to learn more about the accident and the impact of the accident on the surrounding environment, including about the victim. And as I said, this happens interactively. So we built this kind of interactive escape room with audiovisual artifacts, and utilized some methods from theater to like a diegetic narrator to guide the user through the story. So the user goes through, learns about the experience, can gain an understanding of what actually happened in this accident and in the scenario, and kind of immerse themselves in this role of someone who feels strong guilt because of that. After going through this experience, they move on to this, what we call room of possibilities. And the users there are first tasked to think about potential actions from the role of the person that they took on, to which they experience the scene, and to think about what you could do in this situation, what meaningful things you could do if you were the one who had caused an accident, and yeah, and feels guilty about it. So they wrote this down in the cubes, which you can see in the left-hand picture. And they were then asked to decide on the 5 most meaningful actions. So the things that they consider to be most meaningful, whatever meaningful in this case means to them. And last, they could reflect on the choices they made through the specific scales we gave them. They relied a bit on ideas of Socratic dialogue to guide the users in their reflection. And these scales and the whole project were created together with users in a co-design process, as well as with logotherapy experts. Actually, Alex Vesely, who was the invited speaker tomorrow, was part of this project. So in terms of these scales, they, for example, had to assess how typical or untypical this action point was that they chose, how easy it was for them or how difficult, if it is something they would want, they want to do or not, they feel they can do or not, should do or have to do or not. And in the study that we did, people then moved on to the second VR experience, which was, as you can see here, more photorealistic, because we used a 360-degree video to immerse the users. Again, the users took on the role of another person, this time Sasha, who's right in the middle of experiencing suffering. Sasha is unfairly fired and in addition is experiencing difficulties in their family life. So the users watch this video in this 360 mode. So while we recorded the sequence, the user can actually look around and see what's going on not only from this perspective that you can see here, but actually the whole 360. And after they experience this situation, they again return to the room of possibilities and again go through this explicit reflection sequence. We evaluated this project in a mixed methods evaluation with 12 participants. And we tested both individual sessions as well as a group session to see what impact it would make to have, for example, this room of possibility with more than one person and also with a logotherapy expert in the room to guide the situation. And we used we collected quite some data through observation protocols, semi-structured interviews, and resilience and psychological distress scales. And what we found was that maybe not so surprisingly, there wasn't a significant change in resilience scores before and after the two interventions. These took place within like 3 weeks, and they came to us 2 times only. However, there was a significant difference in psychological distress before and after the two interventions. So the self-reported distress improved through or after the study that we did. Very interestingly for us was this concept of the room of possibilities. We found that this specific space for de-reflection provided an interactive and multimodal way of thinking about your meaning in life in a specific life situation. There were some usability issues. For example, participants criticized that there wasn't speech-to-text input, that it was a bit tedious to type in the actions. But nevertheless, they found it quite helpful and eye-opening to have this kind of change of perspective. For the collaborative setting that we did, we found that because the participants revisited the scenes, they were able to rethink their memories and perceptions of the experience. And so in that way, new insights could be generated and perspectives taken. Okay, so a quick conclusion for this case study. So our use case is still in its very early explorative stages. And what we found especially interesting was this concept of the room of possibilities, which shows potential for transformative reflection. So in the near future, we want to focus towards investigating the potential of collaborative activities to bolster resilience. And we are also working on the utilization of other lower barrier technologies like mobile applications instead of having a VR with the VR goggles. It is vital to recognize that resilience is enacted through everyday practices. So yeah, this explains, I think, why our quantitative results were not statistically significant. So in future work, we aim for long-term engagement with the technology and more extensive evaluations. So this journey is just beginning, but we think that it holds great promises for enhancing resilience with the help of technology. Last, I want to say a little bit about this idea of using, like integrating technologies with logotherapy and with Viktor Frankl's work. Implementing new technologies like VR in a human-centered way means that we find ways that technologies support people and social interactions. So it does not mean rationalizing or automating human interactions away. That's really important to us. New technologies like VR, but also like AI, need to be designed in collaboration with and for people. So we think it's highly relevant to include future users, logotherapists, etc., in order to ensure that these technologies are human and humanity-centered. And especially important, there's obviously the user safety and the well-being. But we also see a lot of potential. Technologies like VR can be seen as kind of enablers to reach more people and to reach them in different ways. For example, VR can support good therapeutic techniques like attitude modulation, as you saw in the second case study, where changing perspectives is facilitated through visualizing different virtual realities. We also found that de-reflection is well implementable in VR through this giving this kind of visual space through easy repetitions and through gamification approaches. So overall, there is a lot of positive potential. We think that we can consider, obviously, very carefully, but that shows us a future path of work of Viktor Frankl to support meaningful human-computer interaction and meaningful technology development. Thank you.
We have a few minutes, so if there's any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat or voice them. I just want to say I feel like my mind as a therapist has kind of been opened up to the possibilities that are here. Because I know I've worked with some folks with like neurofeedback and things like this, and I love the idea of kind of making a logotherapy application for a therapy setting to create these changes, and it sounds like some amazing possibilities there.
I think so too. And as I said, I think the important part is to, and I think that's a movement of technology development, anyways, with like Industry 5.0 and topics like that, that it's not about rationalizing away, but really to enhance and to support what you as like practicing logotherapists are already doing, and yeah, to have this kind of low barrier entry to this topic, because yeah, I didn't know much about Frankl like 3 years ago, but through this work I've learned a lot for my like career, but also personally, and I think the more people get to know about him, the better.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
I just read the chat. Thanks, Mira, for the comment. I'm glad that it was interesting to you. I'm seeing a comment from Bernadette. I'll just read it out. How do you think you can practically influence the major players of AI in its direction, or are you looking for logotherapy application development? Um, so in terms of influence, I think we as researchers, on the one hand, we have the responsibility to to investigate it and to disseminate whatever we find, which is the things that we've done so far. but obviously research and policy and politics are quite entangled nowadays. And so, yeah, wherever it's possible, we do want to assert our influence in a way, and at least make people aware of these the relevance of like human-centered AI design and ethical design and such. So we are working towards these kind of ethical guidelines and standards in various projects, but also, you kind of try to you to follow up on what's given by, I don't know, the European Commission or international standards of all these things. In terms of logotherapy application development, we are working on a new project, which again is not really logotherapy application in that sense. I wouldn't go that far, but again, using the work and the concepts of logotherapy to see if we can support people in their daily lives through an app, like a typical well-being mental health app, but with more the Frankl ideas and thoughts in it. Yeah. I'm just going to read. I don't know where Jared went, so I'm just going to read the next question out. Do you believe that it's possible to work with the virtual world to move the meaning will of the patient, possible to widen the field of vision? So I think it is possible. All this virtual reality stuff, it has to be well implemented in order to have an effect. But if it is well implemented, then you do accept it as the reality. But you can do things in this virtual reality that are not possible in like here. So yeah, widening the field of vision, I think, is possible. As I showed you in the case study, this way of changing perspectives, we did it through like virtual embodiment, but you can actually also, view a scene from up there versus up here. You can be part of the in-group versus the out-group, and I think these things do change the field of vision, both like metaphorically, but also in real, like actually.
Very good. You were doing such a great job just answering questions. I was just letting you go. But it is time for us to conclude, and I just want to thank you for joining us and just creating such a interesting discussion. And I know I'm walking away with some new thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. If I'm happy to chat with any of you if after the session there's some time. So yeah, looking forward to the rest of the conference, and thanks so much for being in the session with me.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. There should be a survey to fill out when you go back to the session page in Cvent. But if it's not there, it will be soon. So check back if it's not there.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day for most of you, night for the ones in the EU zone. See you around.